Hi there and welcome to The History Teacher. This revision video covers Weimar and Nazi Germany from the GCSE Edexcel 9-1 course. Hopefully you'll also find it useful if you're studying any of the other exam boards or if, like me, you just love history. I'm 100% self-funded, so if you like my content, please consider buying me a coffee to keep me going. Despite the establishment of a new democratic constitution, the Weimar Republic was deeply unpopular for two main reasons. Firstly, many in Germany saw the signing of the armistice as a betrayal, and the terms of the Treaty of Versailles, the peace treaty signed in 1919, were harsh and damaged Germany's already struggling economy. These two problems laid the foundations for the rise of the Nazi Party, so it's really important that you know them and understand them. The government who signed the armistice were called the November Criminals by some in Germany, simply because they were seen to have betrayed Germany when they surrendered World War I in November 1918. There were lots of conspiracy theories that spread among the enemies of the Republic, including anti-Semitic theories blaming the Jews for the loss of the war. The German propaganda of World War I meant that some people had no idea that the troops were suffering from food shortages or the stalemate that existed on the Western Front. So, when Germany surrendered, for some it came as a shock. Added to this was the nationalism that drove both sides during the war. The surrender for them felt like a betrayal of German national pride. The so-called betrayal became known as the Dolchstoss, or stab in the back theory. Ebert, the president of Germany, furthered this myth when he told the returning troops, "No enemy has vanquished you," and they returned undefeated from the battlefield. Following the armistice, a peace treaty needed to be negotiated, formally end the war, and for some, punish Germany for the conflict. The treaty was eventually signed at the Palace of Versailles in France on the 28th of June 1919. It became known as the Treaty of Versailles. The Germans were not invited to take part in the negotiations. The treaty was effectively agreed by the Big Three: David Lloyd George for Great Britain, Woodrow Wilson for the USA, and Georges Clemenceau for France. France had suffered badly during the war, with large parts of northern France completely destroyed. As a result, Clemenceau pushed for the harshest punishments on Germany. Britain had mainly suffered from financial loss and a high casualty rate, and therefore pushed for financial terms. Wilson, on the other hand, wanted to use this opportunity to create peace in Europe for good, and came to the negotiations with his 14 points, which included a League of Nations to settle international disputes, democracy, and disarmament. The three men met 145 times to negotiate the treaty, which in the end comprised of 440 articles. These can be split into four categories: land, army, money, and blame, or LAM as an acronym to help us remember. The first letter of our acronym, L for land, detailed the territories which would be taken away from Germany and the restrictions imposed on certain others. There were lots of areas here, but we're going to focus on three that are of particular note. The first is Posen and East Prussia. These were taken from Germany and given to Poland to allow Poland access to the sea. This became known as the Polish Corridor. Secondly, Alsace-Lorraine was given to the French. This had been the subject of conflict between Germany and France since the end of the Franco-Prussian War in 1871. Finally, Germany had to renounce all rights over the countries of Poland and Czechoslovakia. On to the second letter, A for army. Germany's army was to be limited to no more than 100,000 men. They allowed only 6 battleships and no air force. In addition, the Rhineland was to be demilitarized. This meant that there was to be no German army force or fortifications in the Rhineland, which included the Ruhr, area very important to Germany because of its industry and mining. The third, letter M, stands for money. As I've already mentioned, both the British and the French wanted the Germans to provide compensation for the financial losses of the war. The Germans were therefore required to pay reparations of £6,600 million to the Allies. This clause alone caused many of the problems of the 1920s. And finally, B is for blame. Article 231 of the treaty stated that Germany accepted responsibility for the losses and damages caused by the war as a consequence of the aggression of Germany and her allies. This was hugely unpopular in Germany, and the negotiators for Germany tried to have the clause removed. However, the Allies threatened invasion if they did not agree to it. The treaty was met with mixed reactions around the world, but in Germany it was hugely unpopular. It was labelled as diktat, meaning the treaty was dictated to them without any ability to negotiate. The leader of the newly elected government, Philipp Scheidemann, resigned rather than sign it. The German people were angered by the treaty for a number of reasons. Firstly, some of the territories lost were populated by people who considered themselves German. They were now forced to accept their new nationality or move. Secondly, the military restrictions were seen as a humiliation. They made people feel like they were open to invasion. Thirdly, the reparations payments were enormous and created serious economic problems for Germany. And finally, and most importantly, Article 231 was seen as a humiliation. The German people did not believe that the war was their fault, and it rankled that they were now forced to take the blame. Okay, that is everything you need to know about the Dolchstoss and the Treaty of Versailles. Don't forget to like and subscribe and leave me a comment, please. I love to hear from you, and I always reply as quickly as I can. I'm 100% self-funded, so please don't forget, if you like my content, I really appreciate it if you buy me a coffee to keep me going. The link is in the description. That's everything for today, and I will see you next time.